The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people are evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kīlauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? And it was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dan started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally got.
Aloha, everyone. I'm geologist Philip Ong with Mr. Dane DuPont from the nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Today is Thursday, November 14th, 2024. It's been pretty slow on Kīlauea, but today is the 65th anniversary of Kīlauea Iki's grand eruption in 1959. So we will spend most of our time talking about that with a couple of feature videos one classic and one by our renowned volcanologist Don Swanson. So that's what we're facing today. How are you doing today, Dane?
Doing pretty good, yeah. We've been working on our other projects, one of which is our volcano toolkit to be able to go and display and create these models that help particularly the youth try and understand and play with the volcanoes a little bit. So we've been working on that and kind of excited about our thing coming up tomorrow when we get to demo these things for the first time all together.
Yeah, lots of that going on. Yeah, so we'll eventually have some video footage to share with you guys of all that. But for now, we just know that we have some other balls we're juggling as well too. So just as well the volcano is slow, and just as well we have some cool footage to watch today. So with that said, should we get into it, Dane?
Yeah, if anybody's got any questions, we will be doing our normal 2 parts. So questions up front about current activity, the video that we're going to go through, and then we'll have a little break and go ahead and drop them in the chat and we'll see what we can do.
All right, thank you. So let's get our screen rearranged and let's get ready for our summary. And one more thing here. All right. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano Summary for November 14th, 2024. Kīlauea continues to be quiet this past week. You can see the earthquake counts are still low, similar to what they were last week, and down from the flurry we had at the end of October. The earthquakes have been distributed mostly on the south flank, with very few near the recent eruption site by Nepal crater or by Mauna Ulu, but with the recent flurry today in the Upper East Rift connector between the summit and Mauna Ulu. So we still have deep Pahala earthquakes ongoing and the flank moving and the volcano slowly filling, but mostly without earthquakes at this point. When we consider the last 2 days, we can see that we had a magnitude 4.1 offshore of Pahala earlier today, down 21 miles. And we continue to have the earthquakes on Kīlauea with that cluster and Upper East Rift connector happening just today as well. When we look at our ground tilt monitors across the volcano, the Sand Hill Station has 2 components, one that points towards Halema'uma'u and one towards the South Caldera. Over the past week, these remain mostly flat, but in the last couple of days seem to be inflating a little bit more quickly, as shown on the ground tilt plots. Moving down the rift zone to the escape road, there we see more convincing signs that there is inflation from the nearby reservoir, as one of the components now appears to be inflating, following a previous trend there as well. And likewise, down past the eruption site at Pu'o'o, that tilt meter has a component that points to the west, which picked up a pulse of filling earlier last month and has been more slowly filling since then, but with a steady incline here in the last week. So it is filling quite slowly out there without many earthquakes and without very fast ground tilt. We do have one satellite image that has come in that focuses on the summit region. It appears to show deflation at the surface at the cooling lava lake, and perhaps at the southwest rift connector. And if anything, we maybe see some very slight filling here in the upper east rift connector, consistent with our other signals. Because of this relative slowdown, the USGS has dropped from daily updates to weekly updates, with the most recent update this past Tuesday confirming the quiet that we report here. That's Kīlauea. Mauna Loa is also quiet, with only a few events over the last week near the summit. However, the USGS has gone out there to restore the webcams, which have been down for several months due to wind damage at the radio telemetry site. They've posted images that show solar panels flipped over bent mounts that house those panels. You see damage on the actual surface glass of some of these panels as well. And so it looks like the USGS has restored those as visible on their online webcam feed today. So that's our summary for this week. Mahalo. And we'll just jump from there right into our Volcano Watch this week, which is a special Volcano Watch, an interesting one. It's titled Aila'au or Kualoloa. I'll have to practice that one, Kualoloa. Hawaiian chants suggest lava flow name change. And this one is worth going into a little bit more detail. And I will scan down to this section right here, which we don't usually focus on. But today we have an all-star author team for this article. So we have HVO volunteer and naturalist Bobby Camara. Bobby Camara is one of the experts in researching our Hawaiian place names, has been involved with many of the place name updates in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park and actually across the state, in fact. Along with Pualane Kanakaole Kanahele and Don Swanson. So really, when these people write, we should pay attention here. And so to cut to the chase of it, on this map, this big flow shown in red has been for many years called the Aila'au flow. And this was named that by USGS geologist Robin Holcomb, who mapped out this flow field and was looking for any reference to what to call it. Shows Aila'au somewhat hurriedly, right, as he says that the name was provisional, given he only found it in one reference, and he was under a publication deadline. So it's taken the last 40 years for us to catch up to this. But what's actually happened is that the chant Kualoloa, published in 1915 by Nathaniel Emerson in Pele and Hi'iaka, A Myth from Hawaii, describes an eruption. In fact, this very eruption that seems to correspond to what we call the Aila'au, right? It begins in the upland portions of Ke'au, Ahupua'a of Ke'au, a broad area affected, destroying forests in Pana'ewa and Ola'a, that's Ke'au area, with a blanket of smoke covering Puna all the way to Apua Point. Apua Point is south. Apua Point is down here, the south part of the island, right? So you're talking about all of Puna covered in smoke, right? Imagine lava is going to the east, it's pouring to the ocean over here in this whole area, and all that blows up the trade winds across all of Puna. That's a huge, huge flow field. If anyone's been in a Kazamora lava tube, the Kīlauea area, that's all connected to this big flow. What they see here, let's see here. I think my mouse has stopped working for some reason. Let's see if I can get this.
I'll go ahead and jump in if I can while you get situated. So yeah, this thing was quite a surprise. You know, we get a bunch of different volcano watches, and when you see one come across like this, it takes a little bit of extra time because there's a lot of implications here. So this is leading towards a name change. The Aila'au flow no longer going to probably be referred to as that. The Kualoa flow will probably replace it in the literature going forward. But I was sitting there reading this like, man, this chant so accurately describes that eruption. And there's such weak references to Aila'au that I don't think that this was a recent revelation. More in that it took a long time in order to get something that was placed in writing and published changed. The process of getting the revision to stick. People knew for probably years this was not right. It's just finally happening type of thing.
Yeah, so interesting here. You see that there's most of the branch goes northeast. There's a little branch that goes to the south to Apua. Both of those described in the chant, right? The timing of it, the places affected. That's how it's all tied together there. So really interesting, yeah. And as far as I'm concerned here, the name change is actually done. You can see here what they say. What Holcomb had provisionally referred to as an Aila'au flow field, we now know should be labeled in future publications the Kualoa flow field. Kualoa, there it is. Yeah. So fascinating, and yeah, combination of the announcement here with the authors. That's the way it is from now on, as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, I would presume that even Dr. Holcomb would agree with that change now that we have an actual reference to go on. So here we are, our first image with Kualoa actually in it.
I was going to say, he's probably surprised it took this long for it to change.
And it's a good thing, because we've described before how actually the story of Pila in Hiaka is the chant that's referred to for this whole eruption, and yet the flow is named Aila'au, so it didn't quite make sense, right? It's actually was not related to Aila'au even in the lineage of the chant. So it's a good fix, and I'm excited to share it with you guys here, and we will try to stick with that moving forward. All right, so that was Volcano Watch this week, and with that, we will roll right into our volcano awareness presentation. What I'll do to start is to just play a very short recap of the eruption itself. This is something that I had put together previously for an app, actually. So we'll see if anyone recognizes this from previous incarnations of my work here. But all this was an app that used to be able to zoom around Kīlauea, so you could see like the imagery from the past in the right location in 3D where it actually belongs. So you may have seen little bits of the videos, and we'll see more coming up. But to start off, let's just show you guys where everything is in the space of Kīlauea, and I'm going to do this through this screen recording I had done on my unfortunately not discontinued app that existed. So this is not a promo, it's just a reuse of something that was already done that's useful. So let's play this. This is a little less than 3 minutes. And there you see that original fissure that came across the crater wall. Here's actually moving in video right there. And as that fissure progressed, it started pouring into that double crater. That lower one, larger one in the image there, was filling with lava. One on the backside was above the lava falls, so it took a little while longer to really be filled up. But after that initial pulse, the eruption focused to a single vent, where then we have higher fountains beginning to build. They start off kind of slow, but they begin growing higher and higher. The crater fills all the way up to the point where that lava falls becomes a rapid. The whole lava lake rises to the point of the vent and begins flowing back into the vent, which prevents fountaining from occurring. It stops off fountaining, starts fountaining again after it repressurizes. The fountains come erupting through the lake, sending out waves of lava across the entire crater. At one point, as lava is draining back into that hole, these chunks of island of the cinder cone that's building there, like all that hill to the side, the left side of that fountain there, is all the fallout of all the chunks of lava that are blowing with the trade winds from the northeast there. So they fall down, they build that big cinder cone, fill that lava lake. The cinder cone is basically on hot putty, so it starts sliding into the lake. So you have waves in the lake from the jet bursting through, and from collapses of the cone into the lake. And when that happens, it can start overturning processes, but also leaves debris, so that when a drain back is occurring in between those jets, at one point a big chunk of the cinder cone gets wedged in there, and eruption starts shooting back out again. but it hits one of those blocks and starts shooting out sideways, right? So from this perspective, left to right, lands in the upper rim of the forest, and up there burns all the trees down. And luckily that happened when people had left the area, because that was a place they used to stand and watch. The fountains were really tall, 1,900 feet, the record for Hawaii, measured record, right? And once everything was over, the lava lake receded, left those islands and cracks. And after a few weeks, magma moved out underground to Kapoho. This was followed by the Kapoho eruption, which also lasted about a month and destroyed Kapoho. But that's not the focus today, and it's just part of the story of Kīlauea Iki. Because after that Kapoho eruption drains the lava from the summit area, the final stage of this story is that summit that collapses, a small collapse under Halema'uma'u, in fact, but visible here from at that point was called the Byron Ledge Overlook, looking across Kīlauea Iki crater to Halema'uma'u with the fume in the background there. So a lot in a short time there, but that's the summary version of the Kīlauea Iki eruption. This one will give you guys a little context in case perhaps might be your first time or you don't remember it quite as clearly year after year. And now with that, we will turn to play you guys a video that was actually put on by United Airlines in 1967 called Discovery 67. And what we'll do is we'll play this, and then we might pause it a few times to comment on some particularly interesting sections. But this video has eruptions from the footage from the 50s and 60s, as well as rare footage of drilling into the Kīlauea Iki lava lake and them using that trolley to send their equipment down there. So that should be pretty cool to see. All right, so that's enough teasing it. Let me put it on the screen here and let's get it rolling.
This is a recent volcanic eruption in the state of Hawaii. There's enough power there to turn a forest into a wasteland, enough to bury a complete village, enough to change the size and shape of an entire state. We'll find out more about how these islands were formed today when Discovery takes a first-hand look at Hawaii, land of volcanoes. Discovery 67, the award-winning program for young people, with Bill Owen and Virginia Gibson.
Hi, and welcome to Discovery. Today we've come to Hilo on the island of Hawaii.
It's a small city, not much bigger than a large town. You might walk through Hilo's town square and imagine that you were in a county seat in Ohio or Indiana.
It's an American town, all right, Bill. But a short walk away from this square, you'd soon begin to realize that there's a lot here that's different from what you might see in most towns on the mainland.
Although it's small by mainland standards, Hilo is the largest city in the island of Hawaii, and it's the county seat of the county of Hawaii. But its citizens come from a surprising variety of places. There are Filipinos here, and a couple of days a week there are Filipino movies playing in Hilo's motion picture theaters. The next night the films may be Japanese, because about 75% of the population on the island of Hawaii is of Japanese extraction. There are Tahitians here, Chinese and Tongans, in addition to Hawaiians and people from the mainland. And where there are different kinds of people, you find different kinds of habits and customs. You can see the differences in street signs, grocery stores, and restaurants. One of the most famous sites in Hilo is right here, in front of the Hawaii County Library. This huge rectangular stone is called the Naha Stone, and it was originally put in front of the Temple of Pinau as a test for chiefs, to prove that they belonged to the royal family.
If you did belong to that royal family, Bill, you were supposed to be able to turn over this heavy stone all by yourself.
And according to legend, King Kamehameha was able to accomplish this feat, and the story has endured for hundreds of years. The islands that make up the state of Hawaii stretch 1,500 miles across the central Pacific Ocean. They're only tiny dots on any map of the Pacific, And in reality, they're the tops of a range of great mountains. But together, they make up our newest state. Scientists claim that the state of Hawaii is built on top of the greatest mountain range on Earth. The lowest of the mountains, which make up the Hawaiian Islands, rise 15,000 feet from the ocean floor. And the largest of them, the mountain called Mauna Kea, here on the island of Hawaii, rises almost 30,000 feet above its base. About 13,000 feet of it is above sea level. These are the Hawaiian Islands, 8 principal islands, running from north to south. Kauai, Nihihau, Oahu, Molokai, Lanai, Kaho'olawe, Maui, and this one, where we are, Hawaii.
Hawaii is called the Big Island, but they could also call it the New Island because it's the most recently formed. As a matter of fact, it isn't even finished yet.
None of this would be here. Not a palm tree, not a fine hotel, not a tourist, not even the people of Hawaii themselves, were it not for a period of violent volcanic activity which created these islands in dramatic scenes like these.
Hawaii holds many of the secrets of her origins up here in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. This is what a volcano looks like when it's not steaming and boiling and pushing its way through the Earth's crust. This crater is called Kīlauea Iki.
It's quiet down there, but that doesn't mean there's nothing going on. Everything around us is testimony to the power of the fiery molten mass which lies under the surface of the Hawaiian Islands, ready at any moment to make itself felt again.
These are ohia trees, or they were before the 1959 eruption, which turned a verdant forest into a charred ruin in just a few fiery hours. What lies between them isn't soil. There's very little pure soil on the island of Hawaii. And here it isn't lava either. It's ash blown out of the crater in the form of red-hot cinders during violent eruptions and explosions. That little hill is new too. It isn't a hill at all, really, but a cinder heap blown up here 400 feet by the violence of the subsurface convulsions that were going on down there.
This is what the same crater, Kīlauea Iki, looked like on the night of November 14, 1959.
That's how Kīlauea Iki came to look as it does at this moment. But how long will the crater stay this way? There could be a new eruption at any time. What can we learn about future eruptions by studying the conditions created by the last one?
Well, Jenny, there are scientists of the U.S. Geological Survey working on the floor of the lava lake right now to find out some of the answers. And we'll join them down there in just a minute.
All right, I'll pause it right there just to give us a chance to comment on this intro, this opening of the sequence. All right, obviously very old-timey, some context in 1967. Geologically, we did not even have plate tectonics yet. And so geologically, we're still very young. We had just had those new images of the seafloor to really discover the true size of the archipelago, right? And it was in that underwater survey that the scientists first started dragging magnets behind our submarines and mapping the seafloors, and eventually that led to the recognition of seafloor spreading and plate tectonics and all of that. So that's all to come after all of this. So really interesting to see this. This will come up again later in the presentation. I think in the context of Kīlauea Iki, really interesting to see this was 8 years after the eruption was over. So you can see how smooth and fresh the crater floor still looks. The dead trees still look pretty dead right there. You don't really see anything growing back yet. If you go to the same area today, you could argue it shouldn't be called Devastation Trail anymore. It should be called a recovery trail because everything is growing back, really, right? It's really interesting to note that. But in this video, 8 years in, it's still very, very fresh. You see the lava-like surface there's not even a bush anywhere down there, right? Still very hot, and we'll see evidence of that coming up. Dane, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean it's just amazing the old footage, particularly flying over and looking at the fountain and stuff like that. Still the footage that's the most impressive today, really, in a lot of regards, that aerial footage looking down at giant fountains. But it's just amazing how big that fountain really was. Like, how tall did that thing peak out at? Wasn't it? Do you remember offhand? Like 900 feet or something?
1,900. Yeah.
1,900. Yeah. We haven't seen a fountain like that in my lifetimes that I know of, type of thing. Maybe when I was too small to know.
Yeah. Pu'o'o had 1,400 feet. Mana'ulu might have had 1,800. Kīlauea is the record at 1,900 feet, 580 meters.
Yeah. Just incredible those
for Hawaii, since people have been measuring them, right? Because before people measured them and outside of Hawaii, both you can get bigger fountains than that. But yeah, interesting.
So, and also the film quality is great, the old school aesthetic and the way that they used to do things back then. Just kind of funny to laugh at. I was laughing at the intro type of thing with all those goofy shapes flying around. Like, what is this?
Right. That's all going to be hand animated, right? Back in these days, right? So interesting. Yeah. So let's get it going again here, and see what comes next.
In order to understand more about the formation of these islands, the geologists of the U.S. Geological Survey go into the craters of Hawaii's volcanoes from time to time to measure and study the changes that are constantly taking place down there. Today, we're going with them down 400 feet into Kīlauea Iki to take the temperature of the molten mass underneath the surface of the lava lake.
It isn't particularly difficult getting into the crater of Kīlauea Iki, but it would be if the men had to carry all of their tools and equipment on their backs. So they've devised a tram line to take the heavier pieces to the bottom.
One of the ways the men up top know their equipment has reached the bottom is by watching the shadow of the pack as it moves across the crater floor. By the time you get halfway down, you can pretty clearly make out the geological equipment, which for some months now has been a visible feature of the floor of the lava lake. What the men of the U.S. Geological Survey have been doing here is very much like the work that goes on in potential oil fields before the digging of a well. The crater of Kīlauea Iki has become a laboratory for these geologists. By studying the nature of this lake of lava, they can add knowledge to man's limited store of information concerning the formation and future of these islands, and perhaps some information as well on how the rest of the Earth was formed. Under this crunchy, brittle crust, there's a bright red vein of molten rock. If you pick up a bit of the cooled and hardened crust, you'll see it resembles something that might have come out of an old-fashioned furnace. This is the solidified form of the molten basalt, which rose from deep within the Earth's crust. But the geologists would still like to know what's going on beneath the surface.
Here near the center of the crater, the geologists have drilled a 3.5-inch hole into the hardened crust on top of this lava lake. They have bored down almost to the point where the rock is molten. Today they're going to take the temperature of the matter 80 feet below.
In order to test the temperature beneath the surface, the geologists, like Dr. Richard Fisk, use a long snake-like rod called a thermocouple.
The thermocouple is now on the bottom, and we can read the temperature of the material near the base of the crust. Running through this sheathing are two wires of slightly different alloy compositions. These wires are welded together just at the bottom of the thermocouple. The great heat down there generates a tiny electrical voltage, which passes up the wires, and we measure this voltage here with the potentiometer. And if I measure this voltage right now, we see that the temperature at the bottom of the hole is about 1,000 degrees centigrade, or 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's actually possible to see the molten lava glowing brightly 80 feet down in the drill hole. From the surface, it looks as if we're actually looking into the center of the Earth. The next part of the job is to deepen the hole and send the drill bit down for a sample of the molten material.
Because the drill has to be water-cooled at all times to keep it from being destroyed at the high temperatures, the melt turns to solidified material almost as soon as the drill bit reaches it.
In just a few minutes, the drill bit will come out. When it does, it'll bring a cylinder of solidified melt with it. Here's a drill bit that came out just a few moments ago. Now, this must be the core sample here, right, Dick?
That's right, Bill.
It's hard already.
Oh, yeah. Well, just a few minutes ago, this was partly molten.
Exactly why are you geologists so concerned with these particular core samples?
Well, here in Kīlauea Iki, we have the unique opportunity to study basaltic rocks in the process of forming. And this has already given us a great deal of information about the origin of Kīlauea volcano, about the origin of the Hawaiian Islands, and furthermore about the origin of basaltic rocks all over the world.
There's always activity beneath the surface here because the 5 volcanoes which created this island of Hawaii, this volcano island, haven't finished their work yet. This is one of the best places in the world for the study of volcanoes, and the tools for that study are all around us. There are 12 devices called seismometers placed at various locations around Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Each of them is attached to a seismograph back in the observatory on the rim of the great crater of Kīlauea. Earth movements produce a response which is registered instantly by the pens moving across these drums of smoked paper.
Those smoked paper drums are conventional seismographs, which are still in use, but even better are the new film techniques. Now the impulses from the seismometers are recorded on film, and you can see them clearly on this viewing screen.
This equipment is designed to record volcanic activity, and yet it will also record a passing truck or a bulldozer working in a field. Dick, how do you know which is which?
Well, it's fairly easy if we look here at the record. We see several different things. At the top, the traces are seen to be slightly wiggly. This is just noise picked up by the seismometers all the time. But here we see the trace made by the bulldozer operating about 2 miles away from the seismometer here at the observatory. It is a continuous, jagged trace, indicating that the bulldozer was operating over this period of time. On the other hand, here's an earthquake. It arrives abruptly at a number of different seismometers scattered widely over the summit of the volcano. It also produces jagged lines, but these lines gradually tail out and disappear.
Well, Dick, we've been down in the crater, we've walked on the surface of a lava lake, and we've seen how a seismograph works. But what goes on beneath the surface?
Well, let me show you, Bill. Here's a very simplified cross-section of Kīlauea volcano. The first thing you'll notice is that the volcano we see above sea level is only a very small part of the total mountain. Actually, the slopes of the volcano extend down to a depth of 18 or 19,000 feet below sea level. Now, the enormous amount of lava that builds this pile is generated at a depth of about 40 miles. And if we were to draw this here on this section, we would have to do it below the level of the blackboard here. This lava rises up and accumulates in a shallow chamber at a depth of about 2 or 3 miles below the summit of the volcano. As the lava accumulates here, it causes the entire summit of the volcano to inflate.
Well, Dick, how do you know it's inflated?
Well, we have various methods for measuring this inflation. We measure the inflation with tilt meters. We measure it with a geotometer that very accurately determines the amount of horizontal expansion as the inflation takes place. And we also run precise level lines over the summit of the volcano. And from the combination of these 3 methods, we found that the volcano has inflated more than 2 feet since the last eruption.
Dick, with all your scientific information and instruments, are you able to tell when the next eruption will actually take place?
Well, unfortunately, the volcano does not operate on any kind of a timetable. After each eruption, or during each eruption, there are some changes at depth, some faulting, movement of the structure of the volcano. And so as the volcano inflates the next time, we're never really sure just how much inflation will have to take place before the lava can break through to the surface.
Now, you can't tell when it will take place. How about where? Can you tell us that?
Well, again, we cannot pinpoint any spot, but the eruptions fall into two main classes. The first are what we call summit eruptions. The lava leaves the shallow reservoir here and moves nearly vertically to the summit of the volcano and erupts in or near the summit caldera here, just outside of the observatory. Or another type of eruption is one in which the lava travels underground for as much as 30 miles east of the summit and erupts on the flank of the volcano. This kind of eruption took place in 1960 and completely devastated the town of Kapoho.
So that's how a volcano erupts. But what do you think it would be like if you actually lived in the path of a lava flow? We'll find out in just a minute.
All right, we'll pause it again there. So there's a lot of stuff in that segment right there. It started off with amazing footage of the drilling. You can see that pool of water sloshing in there, the steaming. They pulled out a core of what had just been lava. They showed the glowing
They're just pointing
hole.
the camera down the hole, looking at the lava down there, like, look, you can see it. Like,
Yeah, it's awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. I
different
don't
age.
know if I've seen that anywhere else. So really, really amazing. I'm talking behind the scenes how we're really impressed with the sound quality. It's really windy down there, right? You can hear them speaking so clearly. Nothing's shaking.
You know, I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, why is this guy in a Mr. Rogers sweater and this woman in a coat down at Kīlauea? And you look at everybody else there, they're all in t-shirts, which would be normal going down there. And I was like, you know, I wonder if they hid their microphone tricks under all of that stuff, because then as soon as they get indoors, they're in t-shirts again. Like they're in lighter
Right.
wear, and it's like you don't got to deal with the wind. I wonder if that's how they did it, because it is that impressive. Like you're just sitting there figuring, like, how do they manage that back then, before you had AI correction for your background noise and voice isolation and all this fancy tricks we use nowadays to make it easy.
Easier, yeah. It's still hard, yeah. So good job for those guys, yeah. So really interesting that part, a whole part of it. The whole explanation about how the volcano is, it's really interesting how they have such clever insights, right, and genius ways of measuring things, and yet some of the fundamental processes, like they don't have a concept of rift zones at this point in time yet, by the looks of the cross section, right? I'm really interested to note that. So really, you can see how things have evolved, and we first had to place seismometers and totemeters to actually have data to then learn how the volcano worked, right? And that's why we know so much about Kīlauea today, is because we have had, back to this era, this whole instrumentation of the volcano. This was the first eruption that actually had a totemeter installed prior to the eruption. Right. So
yeah, I don't know, like going back to the rift zone thing, and did they know or did they not know? And it's just, to me, it's like, how did they not know? If you fly over Puna and you look at all the cones, you just take a photo and connect the dots, you start to realize there's a line there. And what's that line about?
Yeah, so surely they knew that, right? But to actually connect
Right.
it back into a structure, right? Yeah. So the whole idea of the south flank being so important, and it moving and essentially allowing that rift zone to, right? It's the other parent of the rift zone is the south flank there. So a lot of it goes into it. And so we've come a long ways, right? And we take a lot of this for granted now, that we actually can pinpoint likely locations of an eruption because we have information coming through in real time, in hours ahead of anything happening. We have GPS. We have INSAR from the satellites now. Didn't have any of that. We're measuring everything by walking around with giant rulers, basically. Lasers, that kind of thing. So still really clever, accurate ways, but there was really a lot of work. Everything by brute force, no computers, right? Yeah, so it was really impressive, that whole era of work. It's a foundation of everything we talk about today. It comes back to this era. It really is.
Being able to get out there and, all the trolley systems that they came up with and unique ways to do things. It's like, oh, it's nice to see the old way every once in a while instead of, what we have now. I just kind of like it.
Yeah. I mean, we're I think all more respectful and safer now, but yeah, you also can't wing things like that, right? You'd have to have a whole environmental impact, and you would never have a pulley system that goes through knocks over trees on the way down, like, approved into the crater.
Do you think we could even get a drill again into a lava lake? Or is there too many safety concerns for even that? Right?
Yeah,
that's
a good point.
I wonder.
Yeah,
because that was like, let alone putting the thing down the borehole and all the little things like, oh, we just have a camera crew down here on the lava lake with us. Like, wow. Different philosophy back then.
All right, so yeah, a lot of really cool stuff there. I think we're going to see more footage here. We saw a view of Halema'uma'u before the eruption of 1968-69, and we'll see some of that footage coming up as well. So let's play the last little section here.
In Hawaii, there are two kinds of lava flows. The more common of them is called pahoahoa, and it means the rather rope-like form of lava which spreads out across so much of Hawaii. It's pahoahoa lava we're standing on right now.
In 1960, there was a town here, a town called Kapoho. On January 14th of that year, an eruption broke out in the crater of Kīlauea, only 1/4 mile north of Kapoho village. For a few hours, the line of small lava fountains was 1/2 mile long, but eventually the flow concentrated and resulted in a huge double fountain, at times reaching a height of 1,500 feet. A pahoehoe flow destroyed a papaya grove, while crumbling lava advanced through a field. Lava poured eastward into the ocean and spread out, covering an area of 4 square miles. Lava flows like these can move at the rate of 20 miles per hour. Most of Kapoho village was destroyed. The eruption, which had begun on January 14th, finally ended on the 19th of February. A village was lost. Valuable agricultural land was lost. But at the end of the eruption, there were some 500 acres of new land. Land that had been created by lava pouring into the sea.
Not too far from the village of Kapoho is South Point, the southernmost part of the United States. South Point is still growing, and as long as there's volcanic activity on the island of Hawaii, chances are it'll continue to grow, because it's in the line of lava flow. Of Hawaii's 5 major volcanoes, 3 of them are still classed as active. Until they are termed extinct or even dormant, no map of Hawaii will really be permanent.
The story of lava and volcanoes has a violent and terrifying beginning, but the end of the story is something else again. It's hard to believe that much good could come from the rubble which is left on the earth after an eruption. It's burned out, dry, and seemingly useless. That's not the whole story.
In case the green and rich portion of the Big Island didn't tell us enough, there's an area within Volcanoes National Park which gives us a happy ending to the story of volcanic eruption. This is Kipuka Pualu, which the park department calls Bird Park. A kipuka is an old lava flow which is decomposed, but which has not been covered over by new outpourings of lava. Once in the past, this kipuka was as barren and hopeless as the new land at the tip of South Point. Some of the history of volcanoes is contained in the kipuka, and so is some of the history of the Hawaiian people. This fern is called hapu'u. Its young fronds, before they're unfurled, are curled toward the center of the parent plant. They're covered with a substance called pulu. This pulu is a little like a moist brown cotton. Soldiers took it into battle as part of their first aid kit, and mothers used it to cradle the heads of their new babies.
Inside, the untroubled green lushness of the Kipuka. And out here, where the earth steams and smells of sulfur. It's all part of the volcanic time capsule, which is the island of Hawaii. These are the Eloi hotfields, and they were named after the pet pig, the wayward husband of the Hawaiian goddess of the volcano's Pele.
The Hawaiians believed that the goddess Pele determined when the earth would open and pour out fire and liquid rock. When will it happen again? Geologists say that it's overdue right now. The pressures have built up to the point where by rights it ought to have happened already.
And a few weeks after we filmed this program, it did happen. Kīlauea began to erupt on November 5th. The most active volcano in the world lived up to its name, and about 20 million cubic yards of lava began spewing out of vents from the floor of Halimama crater, which is at the summit of Kīlauea volcano. At one time, the molten lava rose to 100 feet in height. In a traditional ceremony, some Hawaiians, to keep Pele quiet and happy, go every year to the edge of Kīlauea and throw in offerings of pork, pili grass, and red fern, and a tiny fish with a long Hawaiian name. Humu humu nuku nuku apua'a.
Credited to superstition or accident, Pele and her volcanoes are, for the moment, relatively quiet. We'll be back in just a minute.
We hope you've enjoyed today's visit to Volcanoes National Park.
If you'd like to find out more about Hawaii, our 50th state, then ask your librarian for any of these books. Hawaii by Charles A. Borden, Hawaii Ne'i by Ruth M. Tabra, and this book, Kimo and Madame Pele by Virginia Nielsen.
Be with us next week as Discovery continues to discover America. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Discovery Unit's transportation and promotional consideration provided by United Airlines.
All right, so pretty fun little film there.
I'm guessing the guy that was helping them with pronunciations took the day off when they were doing Pohoi Hoi.
Yeah, maybe that's something they didn't have back then. A guy helping with pronunciations.
But they had the Huma Huma Nuka Nuka Apua. They had that guy.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
had that figured out. They had all these other things, but Pohoi
Yeah.
Hoi the bridge too far. That one.
Well, I'm sure even the park rangers can only do so much, right?
Yeah,
So
that was good.
pretty interesting.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, that little film. Yeah, so yeah, we got to see that little bit more Kapoho eruption there. We saw the 67 eruption as well, 68 eruption from the summit. They're right there at the very end. They're standing at the Eloi gas fields, they call them, right? Where the pet pig story came up. And that's where Mauna Ulu would then erupt. Yeah, and February and then May of 69. So not only was a sun eruption coming, but there was going to be a whole 5 years eruption at the very site where they said that might be the last view you ever see of it in the video there. So pretty cool. All right, so we'll take a little break here. We'll pass it over to Lou to do our community corner. Well, we want to thank our ASL interpreters as well for powering through that old film. And on the back half of this, we will do our next video with Dr. Swanson as well. But before that, I'll hop off here and pass it over to Lou.
All right. Thanks, Phil. We'll go ahead and get Lou in here and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on. Hey, Lou.
Hey, that was fun.
Yeah, right.
I always love those
Throwback Thursday.
Yeah. You know, in the day where they used orchestras for all their background music, no rock bands, no fancy new music, techno, just old school string instruments, and it's pretty cool to watch again.
Yeah. I thought at this point with what we're seeing on the screen now with that hole, it's like, oh, is this about to turn into an analog horror? Because
You know,
It
that's
filmed in
pretty
that
amazing.
style, right?
Yeah, that's a question I had for Phil. Do they still have these cores here? So maybe when Phil jumps back on, he can answer that one. Let's jump into the community corner this week, shall we?
All right, let's do it.
All right, what's happening around our island here? Well, we do have something new going on up at the park, but we'll get to that in a moment. There's our roads. I got a few emails this week on what's going on with the roads. Everything's open except for the Mauna Loa Road. Anna and I actually took a drive up there on Sunday. That road is open on the weekend. You can see it's only closed after 8:30 to 4 p.m. Did I say that right? Between 8:30 and 4 p.m. There is our alerts and conditions. Mauna Loa Road closed for survey work up there between Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4. The Sulphur Banks trails closed. They're redoing the boardwalk. The Powell Crater and Campground still closed. The construction closures and delays are due to all the ongoing construction that's going on up at the park, and section of Crater Rim Trail closed for nene nesting. Crater Rim Trail is closed 650 feet east of Waikahuna parking area due to nesting nene. Do not approach nene. And the Yellow Jackets are still active. There is the information on the road. Like I said, it's 8:30 to 4 p.m. It's still open all around there. The day hikes are open. Just be cautious. There is our Sulphur Banks. I'm anxious to see the improvements they're going to do on that, because that is somewhere that we like to hike. And down at the Kahuku unit, they have their first meeting. That's tonight, going on at Nalehu Community Center. But if you can't make it tonight, there's also virtual on December 3rd from 6 to 8 p.m. All the information of what you're seeing, if you see a link in the description below, it's for these events, for whether it's their Zoom or other information about their program. This is what they're talking about during that Zoom and the Kahuku unit project that's going on down there. The County of Hawaii hazard mitigation. Officials are encouraging residents to share their input on the plan's priorities by participating in the 2025 public survey. We've got one in Hilo on the 18th at 5 p.m. and the other on the 20th in Kona at 5 p.m. I do have their links with their Zoom information on there if you want to attend and give them feedback. Highway 137 monthly informational update is happening tomorrow night, Friday the 15th. These meetings will provide the community with updates on project progress, including completed and upcoming work, something that we are interested in because this is something we watch quite closely and it's in our neck of woods, eh, Dane?
Yeah, right out back, you know.
And the Hawaii Keiki
wanted to
Museum.
get more drone up on it. I wanted to get a drone up on it, but haven't got it yet.
We'll see. Maybe they have some footage during that meeting.
Maybe.
Well,
we can hope, you know.
Mm-hmm. Come celebrate the diversity of our beloved Hawaii Island Ohana at the Hawaii Keiki Museum going on this weekend. Enjoy free food. How you like that? At museum and mini golf. Now, Dane, I know you swing a mean 3-iron. How's your mini golf game?
Oh man, that'd be fun. They actually got mini golf. I'll be there.
Yeah. Unlimited mini golf, unlimited trips into the museum, and free food from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Hawaii Keiki Museum in Waikoloa Village. And to wrap this up, we are having our end of year fundraiser. Thank you, everybody. We're at 23% of our $5,000 goal. Thank you. Raised $1,168. And I have this fancy little clip here. It is the end of the year fundraiser. Donate at hveri.org/donate to help us out and get us to that goal this year. And I'm taking a look there. Oh, I lost it.
Oh, Park Visitor Center closure announced for January.
For January, yeah. Yeah, the visitor center was still open when we went up there. The bathrooms, the door into the gift shop and all that is still open. but I know we do have closures coming up soon. January, we'll start the renovations up there.
All right. So yeah, we just take the opportunity to thank everybody that helps put us in, keeps this stream going, as well as our other content that revolves around the Kīlauea Recovery Program, as well as the Puna Strong Grant Program, administered by Hawaii Community Foundation, but also they're put forward by the County of Hawaii. So we'd like to thank the county for that. It looks like Lou has a little bit more to throw in here.
Yep. Let's take a look here.
For January 5th. What is that? Yeah, January 5th.
Yep, there we go. KVC closes at 5 p.m. January 5th. Kīlauea Visitor Center, restrooms, and parking. So be aware when you go up there, you'll have to find somewhere new to park, and look forward to their big project. Thank you. All right.
All right. So yeah, going back, thank everybody. We'd like to thank all the viewers that tuned in today. Support from you guys, the likes, subscriptions, the shares, but also the donations. They really do go a long ways to help the channel grow, to get more viewers, and get out there more onto the internet. We did have a donation come through from Nathan over on our website for $25. Want to shout that out. Appreciate that there, Nathan. And yeah, thanks to everybody that's donated to our drive, our end of the year campaign to get our fundraising up with a $5,000 goal there. We got a good start on it, and hopefully we can finish.
Right on. And when Phil gets back in here, maybe you can answer that question about the core sample. Yeah. Have a good one. Let's enjoy the next round of
thank you, Lou.
Videos. Yep.
All right, let's get Phil back in here. Oh, what happened? Why is Lou back here? There we go. All right. Oh, Phil, you're muted.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure where that core ended up going, but I can tell you that you can still go down on the crater floor and still find those drill holes. You can still look down, and they're not glowing red anymore. Some of them still steam, can still scald you, in fact.
But there's still holes that haven't been filled with like debris or people's junk garbage that they've shoved into the stuff.
Well, yeah, it depends which one, right? I want to say they drilled it, I forget how many times, 7 or 9 times in that decade following the eruption. Mm-hmm. So I want to say the first time they drilled it, they found it was 6.5 feet thick. So that hole was only 6.5 feet deep, right? Because then lava's there, it's gonna plug it. Lava's gonna plug it up. And so the next time it might have been, I don't know how far, but let's call it 60 feet. And you still have lava plugging the bottom no matter what, right? So
right.
Yeah, some of them looks like some people might have put some rocks in there, but you can't tell if it was only 2 feet deep before either. Yeah, so, but right. There's definitely some deep ones that still steam out there for sure. Nothing glows though. Yeah. Still hot though. Hot enough to vaporize water that gets down in there, turn it into steam. It's all rainwater. So yeah, 65 years later. Yeah, any other questions to discuss?
I did not see any, mostly just comments about how cool the video was. And wondering if they saw this back in high school. We did have a $20 donation from Scotch Ed come through. Has got a drop for a bit for that cool nostalgic video. Mahalo. Thank you for the donation there. And yeah, I think we can go ahead and proceed. I think Lou had the biggest question is like, is that thing still around?
Yeah, and I don't have a good answer. That's something to ask. Yes, maybe
it was interesting to me just to watch him hold it, because I was then there under the impression like, oh, that thing's gonna be brittle, and if you hold it sideways, it would crack and fragment type of thing. It would be just such a thin piece. And to see them hold it and touch it, and it was like, oh, well, thicker than I thought, and more, contiguous and everything. So yeah, it's just interesting to observation
Yeah,
for
remember
me.
this 8 years after the eruption, this lava has had a chance to cool and degas somewhat at least. That's interesting. Really interesting. All right, so we will have part 2 of our volcano awareness presentation. And before I do that, I just wanted to thank our ASL interpreters once again, who will be bowing out before this next segment. And mahalo as always for making our content more accessible.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you, Dan.
Mahalo, you guys. So now we will put up Don Swanson. This is a highlight of his presentation from 5 years ago. So the title will say 60 years ago. That's from 5 years ago, 65 today. And now we've edited down to about 40 minutes or so, but that's coming up next. So here we go.
What I'm going to do tonight is to, first of all, kind of place Kīlauea, the crater, in perspective, geographic and historical perspective. Then I'll go through some of the events of the eruption using a number of film clips that Fred Reichel made from the time. And then at the end, I'll be talking a little bit about some of the hazards that these kinds of eruptions create, and talk about some of the things that we don't know, and speculate a bit at the very end when I can duck out quickly to avoid the wrong period. For those of you who just have arrived here, Kīlauea is on the east side of Kīlauea caldera. It's about 1.5 kilometers by 800 meters in diameter, and it's offset from where the one part of the subterranean magma reservoir is today and was in 1959. Kīlauea crater actually consists of 2 craters that are pretty clearly shown in this map from 1912. And we don't know the age of the craters except that they're younger than the caldera, which formed around 1500 AD. Possibly the 2 craters collapsed at about that same time, but we really don't know. We don't know much about its past history, though we do know that there was an eruption in 1832 and then one in 1868. These were small eruptions, but they changed the floor of the crater. These are before and after photographs taken by Bob Jacobson, a former ranger here. The one on the left shows the view of the 1868 lava flow on the floor of the 2 craters. You see the trail going down to it. The flows are sparsely vegetated. And then on the right, from about the same vantage point on Byron Ledge, you can see it about the 1959 eruption. Quite amazing, actually. One thing about Kīlauea is that the eruption in '59 is that it's famous for its tall fountains, lava fountains, and we don't know of any other eruption from Kīlauea that has had anywhere close to such tall fountains. So that eruption is unusual in that regard. Kīlauea lies along a trend of eruptive vents that go from Halemaumau to Isla'au Shield and continues into the East Rift Zone. I think this might be a remnant or a rejuvenated part of the East Rift Zone. We know of at least 9 eruptions that have taken place along that zone, starting with the Isla'au eruption in the 15th century. And before Kīlauea erupted in 1959, there had been 4 eruptions. We know about the Isla'au eruption, 1832, 68, and 77 nearby. The events immediately preceding the 1959 eruption included an eruption in Halemaumau, forming a lava lake in 1952. This ended the drought since the middle 1930s with no eruption, and it was the first. It's the longest period without an eruption in Halemaumau since 1823. And then in 1954, there was a 3-day eruption that occurred on the floor of the caldera in that zone that connects Halemaumau and Kīlauea, as well as in Halemaumau itself. And it followed in 1955 by an eruption in Lower Puna that in many respects resembled that in 2018, though very much smaller. I'm not going to be talking about the 1955 or the 1960 eruptions in Lower Puna this evening. I'm going to be talking about what happened at the summit. A tilt meter was installed by Jerry Eaton in late 1956. I'll get more to that later. But it showed, see, I'm trying to find a. It showed that there was inflation taking place. That is, the summit was swelling until the summer of '59, and then the tilt flattened off. And then in the month or two just before the eruption began, there was a sharp uptick in the tilt. And so on that basis alone, it was seen that the stage was set for an eruption. But this is the first time, hard to believe, but this was the first time that we really had a good tilt record before an eruption. So there was that uncertainty as well. Okay, now this is by far the most complicated slide to show you. And I'm going to walk you through it because it really isn't that complicated. This is a map, believe it or not. This is a map. The caldera is right here on this map view. Kīlauea is right here. Volcano Village is out in this area here. The golf course in this area here. So this is a map. Everything in blue shows earthquakes that preceded the eruption. And the crosses with dates on them are earthquakes that are unusually deep, 40 to 60 kilometers deep. 40 to 60 kilometers deep. And these earthquakes out here were not well located at the time, but once the seismic network was improved, seismologists now think that they can move these earthquakes into this area here. The orange dots show earthquakes that were taking place immediately before and during the start of the eruption. There are some that are down here right near Kīlauea, but the really important ones are up here. And I have this pulsing label to signify that. You see all these orange dots in just within a day or two of the start of the eruption and during the start of the eruption. All of those earthquakes way away from the summit of Kīlauea were at least 40 kilometers deep. Now, to put this in perspective, most of the earthquakes in the summit region of Kīlauea are less than 10 kilometers deep. So to see all of these earthquakes long preceding the eruption and then at the start of the eruption, so deep is unique at Kīlauea. That's what preceded the eruption seismically. The eruption began a little after 8 o'clock in the evening, and it started from 8 fissures that were located well above the floor of Kīlauea. The next morning, the word was out. Coconut Wireless was working in those days, and people came to what at that time was called the Byron Ledge Overlook because you could look across the Byron Ledge. Today it's called the Kīlauea Overlook, and people could see the eruption taking place high on the wall, sending lava down into the floor of the crater. And this blow up of that, I've circled the 8 fissures that opened 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. High on the wall of the crater. The eruption quickly narrowed down to just this zone here. And this became the main vent for almost all of the eruption itself. But the eruption started as a fissure eruption. Now, I'm going to be showing several plots like this during the course of the evening, and it's very simple. What we've plotted here is the time that fountain occurred here, something was taking place during this time here, etc. 17 different periods of fountaining occurred during the 36 days of the eruption. And on the y-axis, we show the fountain height in meters. The highest fountain reached was about 580 meters in episode 15, very near the end of the eruption. And it was very close to that. Episode 3. but the record was 580. These fountains, I'm going to be showing some videos of them. They were just wonderful events to observe and interesting ones scientifically. The fountaining occurred in a kind of a pattern. Cyclicity is not a good term, it's kind of a pattern. That there was very low fountaining, as is shown here, and then there was an increase to a maximum height sometime during one of these 17 different episodes. And this would play for some time. And then the fountain would come to an end. It would spurt, and then the fountain would collapse. The spurting and end of the fountain was related to the rise of the lava lake in the crater, such that it really rose up to the level of the vent and kind of snuffed out the eruption. This was recognized at the time and is the prevalent interpretation of what happened to it today. So starts small, goes high, ends quickly as the lava lake inundates the vent. And so this plot is like the one that I showed before with the various eruptive episodes. They're all shown in red now. And the black line shows the depth of the lava lake that was fed by the fountain. So you can see that the lava lake reached a depth of about a little over 100 meters after episode 1 and stayed at about that high until episode 4 when it jumped up, and I'll tell you why that is. And then the sawtooth thereafter to the end of the eruption, and I'll explain what was going on there in a bit. Fred Rackle, from the mainland, but he was living in Hawaii in Hilo, took a number of movies of this event that are really quite striking. This is the first one that he took, and it's not very good, but I just want to show you that early when the eruption of the earliest. Really. What these two first movies show is that the lava is traveling down into the crater from the vents high on the crater rim, about 120 meters above the crater floor. So this is the first image that Fred Rackle took. He was in a plane then, and then he came down to the ground and went to the site. He spent all night out there. The fountains are playing from the fissure. Very small fountains. The episode 1 started very slowly, and the fountains remained quite low for some time. Down in the lower left is the lava lake that's starting to form. You can see it's still a long way down. This is still early in episode 1, November 15th or 16th. This video would show that the fountains were not steady. You know, if you turn a garden hose vertically and crank up the discharge, it'll be pretty steady jet coming out of the garden hose. These pulse. And this video was going to show the pulsing nature of these fountains. And every fountain that took place during the eruption had the same pulsing effect. What that probably indicates is that the gas bubbles that are bursting and driving the fountains, exploding the fountains to great heights, the bubbles are not evenly dispersed in the magma. So that one bubble reaches the surface or reaches a point where it's bursting, followed a short time later, but not immediately later, by another bubble bursting. So you have boom, 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 pulsing. This is the pulsing fountain, and now you see the pulses that I talked about. People see beauty and power in these fountains, and I certainly do too, but the very top of the fountain, it seems to me, is grace, where the lava is, where this particles have just reached their apex, and I think that's really a beautiful, graceful setting, almost like a lullaby. And then as fragments fall out, this isn't quite sacrilegious, I don't think, to say it's a fall from grace. My view. Photograph that Jerry Eden took, occasionally there would be sort of a V-shaped fountain, bifurcating fountain with, and this is probably often due to some obstruction that has temporarily fallen back into the vent and is blocking the vertical discharge, and so the lava is squirting out either side, like putting a thumb on a garden hose. And these things usually didn't last very long, but they were quite prominent. And this is the last day of the episode 1. Again, you can see that the fountains are definitely pulsing. They notice that the spatter is falling onto lava that's already flowing. So there was both ejecta thrown into the air and that fell back, and there was also lava coming directly out of the vent at the same time. And of course, falling ejecta merges with that flowing lava, which is going into the lava lake. What are the sparkles of that? Sparkles are, I don't know. I think maybe bubbles that are bursting, and maybe there's a little burning hydrogen or something from them. Well, sometimes you get sparkles from burning vegetation, but I think this is too far away for that to be the case in this. This is looking from the Byron Ledge area. Lava is coming out of the vent. It's feeding toward us into the small west crater lake, flowing beneath the crust and then flowing down a little steep area and spreading out. The main lake is the East Lake, and that's up in the distance, and that's the one that you walk across when you come down the trail from Thurston Lava 2. By the end of episode 2, there was quite a cone that had been built, that's Pu'upua'i, and it was starting to fall apart. The arrows show lots of glowing or incandescent cracks in the tephra. Tephra is the fountain material that had fallen down, and it was still so hot when it landed that it was incandescent, and so it was quite mobile, and so the cone is beginning to slide downward and outward into the lake. So now this kind of thing where fountains started small, ended, grew big, and then ended abruptly. That continued until episode 4, and then for some reason, even though this was just a small fountain, no higher than 150 meters or so, the lake level rose dramatically. The reason for that, geologists at the time said, is that the vent had shifted location uphill a little bit. I think what they mean by that is that some sort of barrier had developed, a dam between the vent itself and the outflow from the vent. And so the lake could rise up until it reached the top of that dam. And so in any case, starting with episode 4, in early December, you can see that the lake level was consistently higher than it had been before. And then after each fountaining episode, you can see that lake level dropped some. And then when the next fountain occurred, it rose back up to the height of the vent and dropped down again. That dropping is due to draining of the lava back into the vent. The level of lava built up a little bit above the height of the vent, and then when the fountain ended, the lava drained back into the vent. Also, the level of lava can also drop because of outgassing, gas leaving the lake itself. And this is the high lake surface near the end of episode 4, and you can see that the lake is just impinging directly on or against the wall of the crater. There's no evidence there that there's been any drain back, and that's because this is the highest level that lava had reached to this point. So now we continue until episode 8, which was the time at which the lake grew to its maximum depth of just barely overtopping that of episode 6. Episode 8 was remarkable because of something that it did. The fountain, rather than being vertical or bifurcating just a little bit, just bent right over. And it was angled at 45 degrees toward the north. So there was kind of a fire hose effect. And the fountain arced across the lake, at least part of it did, and it landed on the crater rim about 300 meters away. This was a favorite viewpoint. Some of Fred Rackel's videos are taken from that area. And but it was lucky that no one was there during this bombardment that lasted for about 20 minutes. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any photographs of this inclined fountain in the HBO collection. I don't know if any exist or not. But those of you who take the trail on along the north rim of Kīlauea will walk across this welded spatter deposit. And imagine yourself being there and running like hell when that fountain was directly toward you. So the deepest lake, 126 meters, took place deepened by the end of episode 8. And the next slide then will show what happens when the lake drains away. You see there's kind of a bathtub ring or black ledge or something that is left as lava, which was once at this height, drops down because of draining back into the vent. And at the same time, when the lava dropped down, these islands would be exposed. The islands are part of the unstable Pu'upua'i cone that had slid into the lake at some pre-existing time. They're islands, they weren't floating, they were islands, and you can find on the tops of these things evidence that successive higher stands of lava overtopped them. But then when the lava drained away, the islands became re-exposed. And of course, when you go down there, you can see and climb around on those islands if you want. Now, as the eruption was nearing its end, you can see that the duration of each of these fountaining episodes got very, very brief. Comparing with the early durations that were many hours sometimes in length, these were just an hour, 2 or 3. Although episode 15 had the highest fountain so high that it's hidden by this box at 580 meters high. This is Fred Rackel himself, and unfortunately we don't get a very good view of him, but here he is. Now, see if you don't agree with me that this is really quite graceful, where these spatter clots pumice just rise, and then the rise velocity dies out and they fall back down. And now we're going to see some of the high fountains. I'm not sure if it's the highest or not, but it's certainly among the highest. And this is nice because this branch serves as an index, so you can see the spurts nicely as they come up and then pass the branch itself. I'm not sure I believe this. The date on the slide indicates that Don Richter here is observing the vent that had last erupted only 2 days before. Now, that's not so bad. You can approach a vent only a few hours after the fountain. I've done that myself. But the point is, how do you get here? You walk across the surface of the lava lake. So I'm not sure. I think there may be an error in the date. But in any case, whenever he visited that, he found that the vent was about 65 meters until it was plugged by greenback debris, choking sulfur fumes, but he heard or saw nothing. So this is the way that the situation looks now and looked at the end of the eruption. The Pu'upua'i is here. I probably should have drawn that a little bit bigger. The main vent was right in here. The West Lake occupying the western crater. The East Lake, which is the main lake, and when you come down from Thurston, you walk across the lake and go up here to the vent. And then south of Pu'upua'i is the main fallout deposit. This is an area called the devastated area. And then the temper continues far to the southwest from there. I think I joined a lot of park people in disliking that term devastated area because that's something that we imposed. It was something changed. Nature changed the setting, but it didn't devastate the setting. Well, immediately following the end of the 1959 eruption, the activity moved down into Lower Puna, and it's called the 1960 eruption. In fact, the geologists at the time lumped the two and called it the 1959-1960 eruption. This plot of tilt, remember, it was rising, then it flattened in the summer of 1959, and then it increased. The tilt just plummeted for 6 months during and after the Lower Puna eruption. And then the tilt was up and down, up and down, up and down until the end of 1982. I'll show you a plot of that later. But clearly the situation was very different following the Kīlauea eruption in terms of the summit pressure being pressurized than it was before. Okay, now we're back to the earthquakes. This is not quite as complicated a plot. The upper plot shows deep earthquakes. The purples are around 60 kilometers. The blues are 40 kilometers, thereabouts. And this is a plot of earthquakes until the end of 1961. Down here, this is a sort of a time plot from November of 59 here, the time of the eruption, until the end of 1961. And you see this really deep earthquakes. The purple earthquakes occurring in swarms. Now, we haven't seen this since. So this is something that is very puzzling. I've talked to Paul Kugel, one of the seismologists at HVO, a lot about that. We've had a lot of good discussions. And there's no simple explanation for why there were all these deep earthquakes before and for a couple of years after the 1939 eruption. It's really tempting to think that there's a cause-effect relationship there somehow, but we don't really know what it is. Another puzzling thing, it's puzzling only because we don't understand what's going on very well, is that there was no sign of any groundwater being involved in this eruption. Now, because of what happened up here in 2018 and the failure of groundwater to get involved in those little explosions, of course, this is a top priority for us to understand why and how groundwater can interact with rising magma. But it's pretty clear that groundwater did not impact this eruption. Now, conventional wisdom would say that there must have been groundwater present at a depth of 200 meters beneath the Kīlauea area because there had been no eruption for almost a century. So if some past eruption had boiled the groundwater away, there would be plenty of time for it to come back. Look what's happened now, where water has come back within a year after the end of the eruption. But we just don't see any evidence for that water. Conventional wisdom would also say that if water was present, that it should have reacted with rising magma because the magma rose very quickly. The idea is that if there's water, if the rocks are saturated and magma is rising slowly, then the water can boil away before the magma ever reaches it. And so the whole thing is kind of passive and non-explosive. But if magma rises rapidly, there's no time for the water to boil away, and there can be interaction between magma, hot rock, and water that can drive explosions. Well, some very clever mineralogical, petrological study has been made of the Kīlauea pumice, and it shows that the rise rate was about 2 meters a second. That's a general wind. So the magma was rising from about 4 kilometer depth at 2 meters a second. That's pretty darn fast. And you would have thought that at that velocity, the magma would not have boiled away the water, but instead would have reacted with the water. But we don't see any evidence for that. And so the eruption was dry, not wet. And we didn't give this any second thought until 2018. 2018 has now made us start to rethink all of our assumptions. And now this is a puzzle. And we've got to try to understand it. But right now, we don't understand. Yeah. Yeah, it's helpful. These high fountains, beautiful and powerful and graceful, do present hazards. And what I want to do now for the next couple of slides is talk only about the hazards created by the high fountains. Now, I think some of you in the audience have heard me talk here about much larger kinds of explosions that we do have evidence for in the past. They were driven, at least in part, by water. They're very much larger than any of the fountain explosions. I'm not going to be talking about those today. I just want to talk about the fountains such as from Kīlauea. I used to think that they would have been very much more common than the water-driven explosions. I'm not so sure now. So in an earlier version of the slide, rather than arguably, I said are probably more common, but I've changed that to arguably now because I really don't know. Anyway, what kind of hazards can we expect from these high fountains? Well, obviously they're going to cause problems locally. This is the area that's the Hawaii overlook now. This is Hawaii itself. There's a lot of spatter on the road, and if you walk out there, you can still see this spatter on the road itself. This is the Crater Rim Drive between the Devastation Trail parking lot and Kīlauea. You walk that. Okay. This was plowed out on November 20th, even during the first episode of the eruption. I guess they were hopeful that was going to be the end, but it wasn't. You can see how already the trees have become denuded of their vegetation by the falling and bracing pumice. And you can see now why the bank along the road that you walk on is so high. It's been plowed up, just like a snowplow plowing the snow out of the road. So Crater Rim Drive through the fallout area was covered. Summer camp picnic area, you wouldn't know where it was, except you could find where the outhouse was. And other facilities were damaged. But prudent management of the park kept people from being in this area. And so there was no injury. And future lava fountains are of comparable size will certainly have similar effects. Of course, the wind direction is very important in this regard. But what happens if there are fountains that are larger than took place in 1959? Well, we know of 3 examples of such larger lava fountains. And in about 1500, there was an eruption that tossed reticulite all throughout the summit area. You can see how much larger this fallout area is than the area of the 1959 fallout. The reticulite, those of you who live in Volcano, dig it up in your gardens. It's this light, fluffy material that forms a pretty good mulch, actually. That fell out here. And if something like that would occur, it would impact a far larger area than the 59 fountains. Similarly, in the early 1800s, there were 2 fountains that were much larger than Iki. This one here, and followed soon thereafter by one farther to the west in the caldera, also very much larger than the fallout from Kīlauea. And so with these larger fountains, of course, all stands to reason that you're going to have potentially a wider area that will be impacted by them, and likely Highway 11 would be impacted, certainly if there's a reticulite eruption like 500 years ago. And as with the lower fountains, the wind direction is all important in this case. So, the bottom line, Iki-style fountains are probably not going to be too damaging if the short trade winds are blowing. The larger eruptions, probably also if the trades are blowing, but if they're really large and last for a while, there could be fallout even north of the caldera.
How high were the spots?
We don't know, but we can calculate that they were probably around 1,000 meters high, as opposed to 580 at 59. This photograph was taken on December 13th, 1959. Going and coming. It's also a period piece, and to see those tail fins. Now, I know that there's at least one person in the audience who was here, and maybe you are in this movie, I don't know. Anyway, if you were here, I am green with envy. I wasn't. You saw it, I didn't. How unfair can that be? Marvelous sight, and it's no wonder that people, I've talked to several people who observed that eruption, and because they could get so close and safely, it's been the eruption at Kīlauea. All the subsequent eruptions pale. So I think almost certainly the next time we have a Kīlauea Iki style fountaining event, that the people will be a bigger problem than the hazards of the fountain itself, just managing the people. And you can do it. Where there's a will, there's a way. People so enjoy the toll fountains, seeing them close up in 1959. I think that the same thing could be arranged in the future, but it's going to be more of a challenge because there are many more people. There was bumper-to-bumper traffic from Hilo to the summit at that time during the 59 eruption. Of course, the roads weren't nearly like they are now, but nonetheless, you can imagine with all the higher traffic now, what it would be like. Okay, well now I want to just touch on a couple of the scientific legacies. I'm not going to dwell on these in detail, but we learn a lot from these eruptions, and it is important that we learn a lot, because only by learning can we improve our understanding of the eruptions in the future, and so we can better inform the public. So the research is not an egghead kind of thing. It has ultimate payoffs and are being better able to inform the public. And so it's very important that we understand as much as we can about the eruptions, even though this may not make the public, make the news. And we learned a lot by drilling into the Kīlauea Iki lava lake. Many drill holes have been drilled through the lake, even into the floor of the lake. And a lot has been learned about how magma cools and crystallizes in a low pressure environment. And Roz Heltz here has been among the leaders of that study. A terrific amount has been learned from studying the fallout from the tall fountains. And that study has gone on over the years, but recently it's been spearheaded by Bruce Houghton, the professor at Manoa, and graduate students and postdocs of his. So we now know much more about how the bubbles break up the magma, how the clots of tephra flying through the air change shape and change reticularity, change their bubbles, sizes and numbers with time. All this is very important in understanding the process about how fountains occur. There's been a remarkable amount of information gained on the geochemistry of the lava from the studies that were done in 1960 by the people that were here, Jack Murata and Don Rector, and by later arrivals of Tom Wright and Dick Fisk. These are some of the early papers. There have been many subsequent papers that build on this important world-class chemical studies. And then finally, the chronological narrative of the eruption is unsurpassed in its clarity and detail, and it has the narratives that Don Richter and others wrote has been a standard that we younger volcanologists have really tried to emulate. I'm not sure we've done a very good job of it. And finally, how volcanoes grow. Gary Eaton Jack Murata were on the staff of HVO at the time. They wrote this pace-setting paper that occurred less than a year after the eruption in Science magazine, one of the premier science magazines, journals around. And this set up a model that has guided a whole generation of volcanologists. Yes, the model is modified with time. Of course, that's the way that science progresses. But that paper stands above the others in terms of providing a comprehensive model for how Kīlauea operates. And so finally, I might say that the eruption in 1959 lasted for 23 years. Now, I'd be hard pressed to defend that in the court of law, but that I'll show the evidence for that. It's all based on, or it's because of Jerry Eden, who I don't have heroes in my life, but if I did, Jerry would be my hero. In July of 1956, he designed and fabricated and installed a tilt meter, wet tilt meter, electric tilt meter that immediately began tracking changes at the summit, and the early tilt records that I showed are the result of his work. It's the first true tilt meter at Kīlauea. We still have it today. And what that tilt meter shows is that there was swelling in the summit before the 59 eruption, collapse during the 1960 eruption, immediate repressurization, inflation, another collapse, on and on until the start of the Pu'upopo eruption in early 1983, 23 years later. So I can argue that the Iki eruption and maybe the precursor to that sort of heralded an important period at Kīlauea that's very different from what happened during Pu'upopo. Now, we don't know why that is. It's challenging and enduring question that we return to every once in a while. I think maybe there was a less steady magma supply to the volcano during that time, and maybe that's all somehow related to those deep earthquakes that preceded the eruption. It's all nebulous, but there's a lot of food for thought there. In any case, over a beer, I could argue that 1959 eruption lasted for 23 years. Thank you very much.
All right, that was Dr. Don Swanson, USGS HVO. An awesome presentation on Kīlauea Iki, really summing up a lot of that eruption and the science of it as well. Any thoughts, Dane?
Yeah, it's just always great to hear from Don. When he gives one of these presentations, we'll listen and be able to capture them and have them up for the longevity, right? Really good presentation. He makes things sound so simple, but I did like just that little, Don is Don. So when he reads something that's not right, he just says it like, "Oh, well, this can't be accurate. How would you even get there?" Type of thing.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, how would you get there? But until somebody like that knows points it out, you wouldn't think of it. Somebody would just take the reference and run with it. Don doesn't do that type of thing. So it's interesting.
Yeah, really fascinating. Yeah, kind of two categories of things. Like all 59 stuff's really interesting. And then, the time that he gave this talk was 5 years ago when water was refilling Halemaʻumaʻu before lava had first come back. Right, so you can see why he's talking about interaction of water and lava, how important that was going to be, and how it's still a puzzle, because lava in 2020 it came back and also didn't explode. Maybe it wasn't quite as fast as this Kīlauea Iki episode, but still food for thought there too, right? This is before that emergence of the island floating in a lava lake. That and the drain back features that we're going to see that starting about a year after this talk was given, right? See the first of that. He talks about managing a park when there's eruptions at the summit. We've seen that 5 times since then in the years since he gave this talk. So really fascinating to put up all that in perspective that way. But really, it's all about 59, and the 59 stuff's really insightful also, and how he's really re-examining all of that. That's really fascinating to see him do that. not just him, but him presenting the work of the entire USGS crew, of course.
Yeah, really good. You know, sums up for the anniversary of Kīlauea Iki. In case you wonder why we're talking about Iki, it's the week of the anniversary, so we figured we'd do a little tribute. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. A little slow on Kīlauea otherwise, so a good chance to jump back and celebrate.
Yeah.
Yeah. High
So
fountains.
we did get a question come through. If you want to take that, Phil.
Yeah, try it.
We also did have another super chat come through, which two other super chats come through. A $20 from Dennis sticker, appreciate that, Dennis, and a $5 from James with a thank you, appreciate both of those. And then our question from Victoria asks, question on everybody's mind: is Kīlauea Iki poised to erupt again?
No signs of it. Yeah, someday you'd imagine so, but
I
no
will
indication
throw out
of
there that
anything.
it is interesting. You know, Don was talking about 1955 being a smaller parallel to 2018. 1955, we move into 1960, 5 years. We're about at that point. We're a little past it. So, you know, if you are wanting to keep that window open for any potential, there you go.
Yeah,
Not the greatest, it's the best I got.
Yeah, and I was obviously before all these recent summit eruptions, right? So,
right,
a little bit more data we have now to inform it, but yeah, really cool to think about all that. So mahalo everyone for sticking with us here. That was our presentation today. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up, Dane?
I think that's it. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. I might be forgetting something, but we were coming up on 2 hours now, which is kind of a long one for us. But we appreciate everybody that's stayed with us through the duration of this, especially Don's talk and the this was Discovery 68 or 67, one of those
67.
67,
Yeah.
yeah, that was cool as well.
All right. Well, yeah. So we'll be back next week at our usual time on Thursday, as usual, right? We can't cut Don off. We're gonna go a little long today, and yeah, we'll come back to our regular programming next week as well. Right? And come back to, we'll probably talk about Mauna Loa a little bit more this month as we're approaching that anniversary as well. And as always, keep an eye on Kīlauea. So we do all this as a nonprofit to try to improve our disaster response and preparedness through education. So that's why we do all this, emerging from 2018. So mahalo you guys for supporting us and everything we do here and helping our community. So until next week, from the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, or HVERI, we have Dane DuPont. We have Lou behind the scenes, our ASL interpreters, Dano and Carrie, and I am Philip Ong. Aloha, everyone. Until next week.